So my name is Emma Rönnholm. I work with sculpture and installation, and I often work with kinetic stuff, with motors and moving parts, and also with light and various these elements. And the exhibition is called Help Me See. And basically it started out, I wanted to make this kind of light sculptures, which were combinations of light sources and different materials that reflect or transform the light in interesting ways. And then when I visited the space and asked more specific questions, and it turns out that it would have been complicated to make it completely dark, the light sculptures kind of became these sculptures that are still about light and change and transformation, but they don't have their own light source, which for me actually felt like a very interesting move, because now they're works that are kind of kinetic without having any kind of motors or electronics. They're just made of materials that look different from different angles and so on. I work a lot like that, kind of starting from a space or a specific context. So in a way this disadvantage helps me, because it's easier to have like a little bit limited possibilities. And then you can find maybe more interesting solutions than if you can just do the same as always. It's difficult to remember how things started, because it's this process. But there is the small one on the wall, and then there is the bigger one that's actually called Help Me See. So that's kind of the core of the exhibition in a way. And there maybe more before, but there is for me this double meaning of glasses being something that help people see if they have problems with their vision, but also that this ball or bubble is a little bit like a crystal ball, where it's kind of to foresee the future and so on. And of course, working with visual art, you kind of have to be interested in visuals and how we see. But I also noticed that this exhibition also has a lot to do with earlier pieces that I made that had to do with text, and text that you can't read. So I think at the bottom line there is this interest I have in kind of difficulties, like difficulties accessing something that like there's an object that contains things but you can't immediately access it. So, for instance, the bubble made up of eyeglasses. Also, when you look at something behind these glasses, it kind of messes with your sense of perspective, because you don't know exactly how far it is, because there are all of these different lenses. So then there is this kind of extra difficulty added to something that we normally understand immediately. Mirrors are really cool. I'm not the first person to think so, but it's really nice in that piece on the wall, because you see yourself, but you also see the space. So then you kind of had to have this like strange magical version of the space you're in, and you kind of get this, you could get this sense of like another possible reality or like another layer. Yeah. I started out painting. When I started art school, I was painting for the first years. And I think that's quite a common way to go, because when I started out when I was a kid, drawing and painting and liking that, and then so that's something that's easy to do. But then the shift towards sculpture and went through collage, like painting, collage, assemblage, sculpture, installation. And I was also always mostly maybe interested in symbols. So in art school, I kind of encountered this problem of that I wanted to make kind of symbols and images, but if they were painting, like the kind of discussion in art school was that like painting is about painting and the gesture and so on. And I wasn't interested in painting as painting. I wanted to make kind of intriguing symbols. So then that kind of led me into using ready-made materials that kind of were already symbols, and then working with that. I almost always reuse material. Most of it is recycled, basically household materials. Not always, but I like this element of recognition, that the viewer recognizes the material and maybe has a tactile memory of having used it or know what it's usually used for, and also often understanding how it's made, because for me that's the most interesting part, is finding the technique of making something, because I'm really interested in materials and techniques. So when I see an artwork, that's one of the first questions. It's like, oh, how is this made? And I find it a shame if the artist kind of hides it so that the viewer can't know how it's made. And instead, I think it can be an interesting source of meaning, that you ask this question, you look at the work, you figure out how it's made, and then that can make also meaning or associations or so on. I work well under pressure, and I have this. I realized that to kind of an outside observer, it might seem like a complete catastrophe. Like, oh no, she's not going to make it. But I always do that, and because I somehow need this time pressure to concretize things, and also basically the whole show, with a few exceptions, is made in the last 3 weeks. I mean, of course, I apply with a plan, and often, surprisingly, the plan is quite close to what I actually end up doing. But it makes this kind of interesting roundabout thing, that I apply with something, and then I work, and I was like, okay, I'm not going to do that at all. I'm going to do something completely different. And then when everything's finished, I realized, like, oh yeah, this is actually what I wrote in my application. So when I was young, I also really enjoyed writing. So it was kind of 50-50 if I wanted to become a writer or an artist. And after high school, then I did know that that's what I wanted to do. Well, that was like my first choice. I will have another show in Helsinki in January. So probably they will go there. And I'm also now a member of this organization called the Finnish Association of Light Art. That's has existed for a few years. And I'll be participating in 2 of they make these light art events that are often really, really cool. So if people can come, that's a recommendation. They will be in Espoo in just a few weeks, and then in Suomenlinna in October, November. Well, I am from Turku. I went to school there. and my parents still live here, so it's nice. I like Turku. And also the space is very beautiful.